Hi everyone, and welcome to the channel where Doge reads D&D cringe to you. In today's episode of D&D Horror Stories, we have a tale of a problem player that takes things to an 11 when compared to some other stories. So, to get started, I think we're going to need a dose of lucky, the like and comment kitty. And now that we have our psychic protection up, let's get into this doozy of a story. Couple problems and severe issues lead to character murder, betrayal, and so much worse. By Reddit user Corvus Drake. So, this was back in the day with some buddies from community college. I was a veteran of D&D, but it was only the second time that I was a DM, and it showed me that I had a lot to learn, both about being a DM and about people. This campaign taught me that aggressive metagamers are usually highly competitive in play, and that you should make sure a couple is stable before you let them into your game as a pair. This is a little long, because of events that weren't at the table, which also contributed to it. Content warning: substance abuse, domestic problems, stalking, kinda. Spoilers for The Force Unleashed, and generally, you won't walk away from reading this with your faith in humanity reinforced. It was D&D 3.5e, and the cast, with characters' names only: Tom, an elven fighter, and the male half of the heterosexual couple. Here's our metagamer. He spent hours making a min-maxed elf that took feats so he could dual-wield rapiers with effectively no offhand penalties once he hit level 5. Mandy, a human barbarian, and the female half of said couple. The sessions took place at the home she shared with Tom, and she always had snacks, and by snacks, I mean a 4-course meal, ready for the sessions, and truly came off as a delight. Jane, a half-elf rogue. Jane's player was very attractive physically in real life, and wasn't dating, as her last boyfriend had died a year prior, and she just wasn't ready to get back into the dating game. Inversely, the character was badly scarred and overtly sexual. It seemed like a harmless way to kinda channel her issues and didn't cause any problems, so I allowed it. Sparky, a gnomish cleric. This character was just a treat. She was able to heal because of a religious icon she carried, which had an enchantment, but she was really a sorceress that hadn't acknowledged it about herself. She was sent on a pilgrimage to get her as far away from the church as possible before she did more damage, as when she'd try to cast a major cleric spell, we rolled on a table to determine which sorcery spell she cast at that spell level. The story. After a campaign that Tom ran in Advanced Dungeons & Dragons that ended in a character death and the remaining members of the party scattered into the winds, the group said they wanted to play 3.5e. As I was the one with the most experience in that system, I was asked to DM, and I said I'd give it a shot. To make it easier and get a good idea of 3.5e module building, I started with the 3.5e Starter Kit campaign, and built a sandbox around it, where the actions of the party would determine what I'd write for the next session. At first, it went very well, though the starter kit does introduce a chance of spreading a weapon of mass destruction, but that's another story. The couple was very pleasant, fun was had, and we all became closer as friends. Often, we'd just meet up at Tom and Mandy's house after classes and discuss the sessions, or play unrelated games. In hindsight, this is when I saw my first warning signs, but I didn't recognize them then because I was young and dumb. After the party finished the starter kit, they endeared themselves to the neighboring town and found clues that there was a very lucrative contract available at the megacratic city across the ocean. The starter kit leaves a chance for the party to be quite rich, which they took a few in-game months to amass quite a lot of wealth. They had no trouble buying passage on the ship, a galleon which could carry their wealth and the 4 horses they'd purchased. It was clear that the crew of the ship was once a privateer crew gone legitimate, and Jane decided to pay her way in other currency, which ostensibly led to her pregnancy. She begged me to use the rules from the Book of Erotic Fantasy for non-session roles about it, but would turn out to have nothing to do with it. Mandy endeared herself to the crew by helping with ship tasks and learning the basics of how to sail. Sparky had finally figured out that she was a sorceress and spent a lot of time brooding in her cabin, but quietly practicing her cantrips. Tom, however, was secretly plotting against the party to advance himself. He tried to cut a deal with the captain a few times to sneak more of the wealth into his pile, and was basically behaving like a barkeeper at an AA meeting, constantly trying to persuade crew into engaging in a little theft. Since Jane was sleeping with the captain and the plans made little sense, he constantly failed. I thought he got it out of the system as he stopped trying, and then we basically used a couple of sessions as interaction aboard the ship during travel and getting access to new lore. Intermission. I went to Tom and Mandy's place, and Tom wasn't home, but Mandy let me in and we were just hanging out. I could tell she wasn't in the best mood, but she wanted company, so I just hung out with her a while and started playing The Force Unleashed on their PlayStation while we talked about nothing in particular. Her mood didn't improve, and suddenly, Mandy blurts out, "Just so you know, what you're doing is pointless after the rebellion starts, because Starkiller dies at the end." I hadn't even reached the parts where Starkiller has much to do with the rebellion. Realizing that she'd maliciously spoiled the story because of her bad mood, she immediately apologized when I stopped playing, and asked if I'd like her to leave the room. I told her it was okay, and asked her to tell me what was on her mind, but she just said that she was fine. I found this interaction very strange, and she was suddenly back to her bouncy happy self shortly after. Red flag number 1. In the next session, a seemingly abandoned sloop, a small and fast ship, was spotted by the crew, floating and with no visible damage at long range. The session involved convincing the captain to stop. Tom finally suggested riches might be aboard, which finally persuaded the captain successfully. We started choosing gear to equip from their massive loot pile in the ship's hold, and made a plan to salvage the ship and sail it to dock alongside the galleon. We ran out of time, so we called session and planned to proceed during the next one. Intermission 2. Tom asked us to help him and Mandy move something from his parents' house, and since they had been great hosts, we of course agreed. I met with Jane and Sparky at Tom and Mandy's, and we rode together. Tom's parents weren't home, and had just told him to swing by and pick up the stuff when he could. Tom and Mandy seemed fine the whole time, but the house was one of the creepiest things I've seen in a while. Not like overtly murder-stabby creepy, but that feeling of something is really off here that you just can't shake. Then I realized what it was. The pictures. Family pictures everywhere of Tom's parents and older brother. But no Tom. Tom wasn't anywhere visible. When we got to the den to get the items we came for, I finally found one. A single oval picture of Tom when he was a child, sitting on a table I almost didn't see in the room. You could look around and easily see that Tom's brother was the star child. Sports trophies, birthday pictures, academic awards, all Tom's brother Eric. I could feel the shadow of Tom's brother hanging over Tom the whole time. I pointed it out to Sparky and Jane in a quick aside, and they were visibly creeped out too. Jane looked at one of those frames that can take many pictures and got goosebumps, noting that Tom wasn't in any of them. We got what we came for and got the hell out of there. Red flag number 2. Well, 2.5 really, since I realize now Tom might have tricked us into stealing from his parents. However, we got another one that day. We got back to Tom's place, and Mandy confided with us, while Tom was in the shower, that Tom and his parents didn't get along. She'd seen our reaction to the house, and told us not to bring it up. And we didn't. But Tom needed help though, and we should have brought it up. Our silence just let our friend spiral. I got a taste of that when it came up that I got a student loan dispersal, and immediately Tom asked me for some of it for the next, and which I discovered was a chain of them, new scheme to be noticed. I didn't give him any, instead asking if Mandy knew of his ambition, to which he got quiet and changed the subject. Red flag number 3. We held off on sessions for a bit, thinking maybe Tom and Mandy could use a little time for Mandy to at least get him off his scheme. Meanwhile, Jane and I were hanging out at my place one day, had a few drinks, and started talking about our own issues. And it led to sex. Nothing life-changing, just 2 consenting adults working out their problems with life horizontally for a bit. And we both agreed it was some harmless fun and not to make a big deal about it. A month later, we met at Tom and Mandy's for the next session, where I discovered that Jane had told Mandy that we'd slept together once during a kind of girl talk moment, and Mandy accidentally let it slip before Jane and Sparky arrived. Tom was angry and despondent. Mandy was suddenly a little sad, but also angry with Tom. Tom was upset that Jane and I had done anything because he was into her and showing it right in front of his live-in girlfriend. I texted Sparky and Jane and canceled the session, and Mandy asked if we could try again next week, saying that Tom would be over it, and honestly, she was glad his attention would be off Jane. Red flag number 4, and probably 5 through 9. The penultimate session for the group comes up. The party goes on to the sloop alone, with Tom staying back as well. Suddenly, he reveals his plan. He kicks the gangplank into the water while the party is below decks on the sloop. He then goes to the captain and offers him half the hoard in the hold if he just sail away from the sloop and leave them there. Now, as a DM, I should have just said no, but I hated killing immersion and decided to play it out. You see, there had been invisible assassins on board that sloop that had killed the crew and dumped the bodies. They were zealots, ready to blow themselves up if they were losing a fight, and the sloop was part of their plan to isolate their real targets, the party. Had anyone detected magic or used an item from their stash that effectively had that spell in any way, the invisibility spells would have been obvious, but instead, the assassins got aboard the galleon, reasoning that they might be able to identify and kill the party quietly there, and commandeer the riches for their leader. A lot happened next, so I'll try to cover it quickly. The assassins got aboard, successful stealth rolls for them behind the DM screen, while the party tried to figure out why there were char marks and broken wood on the ghost sloop. Just as the party came back above deck and saw Tom laughing from the galleon that had begun to leave them behind, an assassin critically failed the stealth roll. In the powder room, he detonated, blasting apart the galleon as the other 3 heard and felt the explosion and detonated as well. Tom made the save on falling into the water without drowning, but had to be rescued by the party from the rapidly sinking hunks of wood, and notably, their riches and horses, on the way to Davy Jones's locker. Tom, while annoyed his plan didn't work, seemed weirdly satisfied with the outcome, while the party was too stunned to react. With what I'd seen so far, I called the session, thinking I was now intercepting temper issues from a now fuming party. Mandy pulled me aside and said that it was the right call, and thanked me. Final intermission. We all went to a club the next week instead. I had to move apartments that week anyway, and we thought maybe some real-life hanging out, as we had before D&D, could smooth any cracks formed by recent events. Weirdly, Tom demanded that the bouncer put X's on his hands to prevent himself from buying alcohol, decrying himself as an addict. While that would explain some of what we'd experienced with him, and were ready to believe he'd been keeping that secret and coming to terms, it was obvious quickly that he was not an addict of any kind. He became like Frank from the video game House Party, requiring people around him to not have alcohol, cigarettes, or talk about any mind-altering substance, even at the club. Mandy was visibly frustrated, and I would find out later that she told Sparky that Tom wasn't an addict and didn't even like liquor, but had been going to a Christian addict support group and telling everyone he met about his struggle. He never once said what substance exactly he was addicted to, always saying that it was too painful to discuss, and just soaking up the unquestionably deserved support and attention good people give to those struggling with addiction. Who wants red flags? We're overstocked. Wait a minute. Is this Fight Club? It was the final session now, and we're back on the boat. Tom's hauled up out of the water by Mandy, who demands to know what she just witnessed. Tom confidently rolled opposed persuasion checks against each member of the party. High charisma was part of his build, and rolled 2 4s and a 2. Sparky, trying to keep it all in character, attempted to intimidate him with fire and going full angsty goth over being a sorceress. But with that opposed roll, he made it. Through interrogation of Tom, tied to a chair by his own real-life girlfriend in-game, and investigation, they figured out what really happened. Then came the darkest moment I've ever witnessed in a tabletop RPG game I've played. Mandy punches him, and being a barbarian, and with Tom being restrained, this hurt him a lot. Instead of confessing to what he'd done or apologizing in any way, Tom just kept claiming they were all wrong. Then, Mandy just starts rolling dice. All she wanted to know with the first punch was what AC to hit, and to hear Tom state his new HP. Sparky, Jane, and myself watched in stunned silence as Mandy just starts rolling over and over. Hit, 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 hit. Mandy was just wailing on him, and she was not going to ask the DM. And this DM was too shocked, and honestly too smart, to stop what she was doing. I knew I was about to call session, but sometimes it's better to let the crap hit the fan than catch it with your face on its way up. And the look on Mandy's face was as telling a warning as a biohazard sign next to a pile of needles. The rolls continued until Tom was at negative his HP total. She had just Sin City-style punched Tom's character in the head until he simply didn't have one anymore. She threw the body overboard, and in regards to the red paste and bone on the deck, told Sparky, "Get a mop." Sparky didn't respond. Nobody did. We sat there in total silence for a time that makes you aware that minutes pass extremely slowly when nothing is happening. Finally, I managed to say, "So, I think that's it for the night. It's getting late." To which Sparky and Jane agreed very quickly. The yelling started as we got out the door. I contacted Mandy later, and she agreed it was probably a good idea that she and Tom leave the game. So I started hosting, and as we added a couple of people, the campaign lived on. Meanwhile, I found out that Mandy called Tom out on not being an addict, and being sick of him playing one for attention, and that he would be sleeping on the couch that night. So he responded to that by going to the store, buying a bunch of cans of compressed air, and huffing them all in the car outside the next day, while Mandy was still asleep. He timed it so her alarm would go off not long after, and she found him half dead in the car and had to call an ambulance. His first words to her when he came to were, "I told you so." If that isn't enough horror for you, there's an epilogue. A month or so later, I noticed that I was missing important documents, enough to steal my identity if someone really wanted to. I found out that during my move to a new place, Tom had secretly stolen them, as he and Mandy had stopped by once to help. Being certain that this was the cause, I contacted Mandy, who asserted that she hadn't seen them. It was almost 2 years before I got them back, when someone we both knew passed them to me with an "I'm sorry" note from Mandy, explaining what happened, as I hadn't spoken to her and Tom in ages. He had stolen from all of us, reasoning that if he had a falling out with us, he could eventually be a hero and find the items mysteriously. And the fact that I noticed ruined his plan, so he just kept them. She'd found his stash and was sending things back to people through connected acquaintances that we could trust. I haven't spoken to Mandy or Tom in years, but I always hoped Mandy finally got him into therapy. as by some miracle, or evidence that trickster demons walk among us, they didn't break up. The friend group did though, and I spoke to Jane when I ran into her at a sci-fi convention in town, and with a sad look in her eyes, but one of those smiles because you are about to say something that is so bad that you have to laugh to cope with it, she told me what became of them. Oh, he refused therapy, but she stayed with him. They're married now. I remained nowhere near them. I even asked Jane to not mention having run into me if she talked to them again after that convention. It's sad, but it's better than having to be witness in the inevitable criminal case that I think will come of that marriage, if it hasn't already. TLDR: player with serious issues and his girlfriend bring their issues to the table, leading to in-game backstabbing, possible real-life larceny, unplanned PvP, and culminating in terrifying body horror, and one of them overdosing on canned air canisters to keep control of the other. Holy freaking hell. Talk about a scheming, manipulative son of a bitch. Pretending to have a problem that many people deal with on a daily basis just for the attention is super messed up. Then to purposely almost off himself with canned air just to get back at his girlfriend. Just, what the hell, man? Not to mention the whole plot of stealing things from people, just so he could feed into some sort of savior complex by later pretending that he found said items. This dude has some serious issues. And, I mean, I'm usually a proponent of not dealing with real-life issues in game, but I can see why Mandy did what she did to Tom's character after he betrayed them in game. I guess it was healthier just doing it to him in the game instead of real life. Though, I think we need another dose of Kidium after that story. Have you ever had a player at a table that just took things to unthinkable levels of crazy? If so, and would like it to be shared on the channel, be sure to post it to the d&Ddoge subreddit. As always, I appreciate all of you, and I hope all of your rolls are natural 20s. Until next time.